Welcome back to Peston on Sunday. I'm now joined by UKIP's, I think it's fifth leader since 2016, Gerard Batten. Good to see you this morning. Your predecessor, Nigel Farage, struggled for years to persuade British voters that you were more than a single-issue party. Last week, your big interview was with one of the founders of the English Defence League, Tommy Robinson, and obviously the entire interview was about your concerns about immigration to this country of Muslims. You are turning UKIP back into a sort of anti-Islam single-issue party, aren't you?
Did you watch the whole interview? Because Tommy asked me how I got involved in politics, and I explained to him how that happened, and that UKIP had always had a full range of policies right from the start. We were never a single-issue party. We've always had a manifesto right from the start. And we are developing a new manifesto now as we go forward. He was asking me about particular issues which are relevant to him. That was how the interview was slanted.
But it is one of your also personal obsessions, isn't it?
No, it's not an obsession to be concerned about something. I'm concerned about lots of things. And if you ask me questions about something, I can hopefully give you some answers on a particular subject, but that was his. And I have been interviewed by a lot of people over the years, from all of the main media outlets. So he is now a journalist, and he interviewed me in his capacity as a journalist.
I mean, one of the things that struck me was your statement that it's now worse, you said, these are your words, to be called a racist than to be called a murderer or a paedophile.
Well,
what did you mean by that?
I think it now has become a crime whereby it's like witchcraft in the 16th century. You are guilty until you can prove your innocence. And I think that's a very dangerous thing, where this word is bandied about. There's no definition of what it means, by the way. It's used to accuse people of things which are fairly indistinct. And it is becoming a crime whereby it is the worst thing you can be accused of. Probably I was exaggerating a little bit, but I was trying to make a point.
But it sounds as though... I mean, look, you have said, for example, you've described Islam as a death cult. You've said you'd want to screen immigrants to make sure that they're not extreme in their views when it comes to their Muslim faith. It sounds, though, when you say that it's worse to be called a racist than to be called a murderer, that there are other things you want to say, but you can't.
Not at all. What I'm making the point again is that we've now reached this position where you can be accused of something where you're more or less guilty until you're proved innocent. And I was interested in, Sadiq Khan was talking a lot about racism earlier on, and then he made the point at the end of the interview that he wants to see a preferential scheme for EU citizens over other migrants. Well, most of the people that live in the EU are probably white, majority of them. So isn't that racist to say you'd have an immigration system where you prefer people from the European Union rather than have a fair system?
So you'd be opposed to that?
Absolutely. I want a fair system for anybody in the world who wants to come, but a very
strict... Do you want any immigration into this country?
Yes, some immigration. We've had mass uncontrolled...
What sort of numbers?
Well,
do you approve of the Prime Minister's target, which everybody says is unrealistic, of 100,000
Right,
a year?
I think that's too much, my own personal view.
What should it be?
Well, it's very difficult to talk about exact numbers. First of all, you have to break immigration down into people who are coming on work permits. Now, in most countries in the world, if you have a 2 or 3 year work permit, you're required to leave at the end of that work permit. You have seasonal workers, for example, on farms, who come in for 6 months or 3 months or whatever, and we've always had that system in the past. And then you have immigration for permanent settlement, where people are actually coming in to marry somebody or they're applying for citizenship in due course. Now, if you go back to the 70s, we had about immigration of about 30,000 a year, and you will famously remember Mrs. Thatcher famously said we're being swamped. Well, that isn't even a week's amount of immigration that we're getting now. And I think that probably immigration for permanent settlement, not counting people who are coming in on a temporary basis, is probably between about 30 and 50, would be a reasonable amount.
Now, on the narrower issue of dealing with what you think is, and many people would disagree with you, the problem with particularly Muslim immigration, you've said it depends on, and I don't see why, Brexit. Why does it depend on Brexit?
I said it depends on Brexit.
Yeah, you did. You said
context?
It in the Tommy Robinson interview. You said...
Well, we can't control immigration policy if we don't properly leave the European Union. I mean, you can't have a policy on anything unless you leave the European Union, because ultimately it's decided by the European Union. So unless we have a completely clean break from the EU, then you won't actually be able to have a meaningful policy on very much at all.
Now, there is a huge debate about alleged anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. some would say that some of the remarks that you make about Muslims are very similar to the sort of things that, for example, the Nazis said about Jews in the 30s.
Actually, you want to look at what I've said, because I always talk about the ideology of the Islamic religion. I don't talk about individuals. I don't talk about people, because I take people as I meet them.
Right.
You know, I accept people as they are. What concerns me is ideologies and whether they are appropriate in this country or not. It's the ideology that's the problem. And the reason that you have the reason you've got this degree of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, in my view, is because it very much depends upon Muslim voters in inner cities. And the Islamic religion is inherently anti-Semitic, and therefore they are pandering to a certain section of
I'd love to challenge you on that. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time